So we'll now begin with a review on fixed income derivatives. Up till now, we've studied derivatives on stocks, commodities, and other instruments. Derivatives essentially are instruments that derive their value from an underlying, and as we discussed, that underlying could be any asset or any instrument. Now, just like we have derivatives on the other instruments, stocks, commodities that we studied, we can have derivatives on fixed income securities as well. Fixed income securities include instruments like bonds, mortgage-backed securities, and other interest rate-based instruments. So in this review, we'll study in more detail about derivatives, that is options, forwards, futures, but on fixed income instruments. Now before we delve into the concept of derivatives, we'll quickly revise the concepts of fixed income valuation and fixed income ones. Please recall, the process of valuing a bond essentially involved three steps. That is, first, estimate the cash flows over the life of the bond, that is the coupon payments plus the principal repayment at maturity. Determine the appropriate discount rate based on the risk of the estimated cash flows. And calculate the present value of the estimated cash flows by multiplying the expected cash flows by appropriate discount. So let's assume we have a 5% 3-year annual pay bond with a par value of $100. Let's depict the cash flows of this bond first. At t equal to 0, we'll get nothing. The payment will come at the end of the first period. It's an annual pay, so it will come at the end of the first year, an amount of $5. At t equal to 2, we will get another $5. And at t equal to 3, we will get $105 from this bond. That's the first step, that is estimating the expected cash flows. Now please note, the appropriate discount rate should account for the risk of these cash flows. If this was a corporate bond, then there would be an inflation risk, there would also be credit risk, there would be many risks. If it is a government bond, for instance, then credit risk generally is not a risk because government bonds are assumed to be a risk. Either ways, if $5 is the cash flow coming at t equal to 1, then the value of these cash flows to me today will be lesser. It will be lesser to the extent of the interest that I could have earned if I received this money right away, or if I received this money at t equal to 0. If this is a 1-year bond and the bank is offering me a 1-year discount rate of R1 or a 1-year rate of interest of R1, that is, I can put my money in a bank for 1 year and get a rate of interest of R1 on that investment, then 5 would be discounted back by 5 upon 1 plus R1. Similarly, if I could go to a bank and the bank was offering a 2-year rate of R2, that is, if you invest $100 today, at the end of 2 years, you'll get 100 into 1 plus R2 to the power 2. For whatever reason, this R2 may be different from R1, as we will study in the coming slides. So this 2-year cash flow has a value of 5 upon 1 plus R2 to the power 2 today, because it is coming 2 years later. That is, if I had this much money today, I could have invested it at R2 myself and made it equal to $5 at the end of 2 years. $5 coming 2 years later is worth so much. Similarly, for the 3rd year's cash flow. Now, each cash flow essentially is being multiplied by 1 upon 1 plus R1. Second cash flow is multiplied by 1 upon 1 plus R2 to the power 2. Third cash flow is being multiplied by 1 upon 1 plus R3 to the power 3, so on and so forth. These factors that the expected cash flows are multiplied by are referred to as discount factors. Remember, a discount factor is simply equal to 1 upon 1 plus the appropriate rate to the power I. So if it is the 3rd year discount rate, it will be 1 upon 1 plus R3 to the power 3. If it is a 2-year discount rate, it will be 1 plus R2 to the power 2. Similarly, if it is a 1-year discount factor, it will be 1 upon R1 to the power 1, as we can see. So remember this. If a discount factor is given in the question, then you don't need this whole, you can just multiply it with the discount factor. Sometimes questions mention the rates. If the rates are mentioned, then you'll have to do the calculation as we depicted. If the discount factor is directly given, then you just have to multiply the expected cash flow by the discount factor for that year. That was a quick review on the bond valuation process. Please remember, the price of the bond determined by this method is referred to as the dirty price of the bond or the full price of the bond. Full price implying this is the actual price that the buyer has to pay and that the seller of the bond will receive. Discounted back value of all expected cash flows. Now, there is just some convention in the bond market that you should be aware of. The convention is of quoting the accrued interest and clean price. So, accrued interest is simply the coupon accrued. So, if I buy an annual pay bond, then coupon is paid only at the end of the period. Let's say between t equal to 2, one coupon would have been paid, and t equal to 3, another coupon would have been paid, whatever the amount be. Now, if we are exchanging the bond, purchasing or selling the bond in the middle of the period, the t equal to 2.4, then we quote the clean price and the accrued interest separately. So, accrued interest is defined as the coupon amount multiplied by the number of days from the last coupon to the settlement date divided by number of days in the coupon period. Let's say it's a 1-year bond, so there are 365 days between coupon period, and let's say we are buying it at the end of 182 days, or we are changing it today about around 1/82 days. So the accrued interest will be calculated as 5 into 182 divided by 365. Or this is the amount of the coupon that has been accrued to the seller, or which has to be paid to the seller. Please note, the valuation of the bond doesn't change. I still have to pay the price that I calculated in the previous slide in the manner described. However, in the market, the accrued interest is often quoted separately from the clean price. Now, if the accrued interest has been calculated, it is calculated as the coupon amount into the number of days from the last coupon to the current date or to the settlement date divided by the number of days in the coupon period. Then the clean price will simply be the full price or the dirty price minus the accrued interest, because the buyer pays the seller the clean price, also called the quoted price at times, plus the accrued interest. We'll do an example and understand. A $5,000 par value US government bond pays a semi-annual coupon of 15%. Given the following details, compute the accrued interest if the last coupon payment was 120 days ago and there are 30 days in each month. Because please note, it is the actual number of days upon the actual number of days. So this is important. Otherwise, it would be tough to calculate the actual number of days. Some months have 30, some months have 31, some even have 28 days. So, the accrued interest is the periodic coupon payment. How much is the periodic coupon payment? 15% into the par value into 1/2, since it's a semi-annual coupon bond, which comes out to be $375. $375 is paid at the end of every 6 months. So for this bond, what will be the accrued interest? It will be the coupon payment multiplied by the number of days since last coupon payment. How many days is that? 120 days have passed. divided by the total gap between the coupon payments. Essentially implying that the buyer has held this bond for 120 days after the last coupon payment. So even though his coupon has not yet come, 120 out of the next 180 days coupon belongs to him. So 375 into 120 by 180, that is $250, is the accrued interest that he will get over and above the clean price. Clean price can then be derived from the dirty price. So let's solve it further. Suppose that the bond from the previous example is a US government bond that pays coupons semi-annually on January 1st and July 1st, and assume that it is now April 1st, 2015. And the bond matures on July 1, 2025. Compute the dirty price of this bond if the required annual yield is 10%. So we'll first depict the timeline and then estimate our cash flows and then discount the value back to compute the price of the bond. Now, here today, or t equal to 0 for us is April 1, 2015. The next coupon payment is likely to come at July 1, 2015, and thereafter every 6 months you will keep getting a coupon payment. For this 1, 1.5, 2, so on and so forth, from July 1, 2015 till July 1, 2025 would be how many coupon payments? If the first payment is on July 1, 2015, on July 1, 2016 would be the third payment. January 1, 2015, this is the first payment, this is the second payment, this is the third payment. So till July 1, 2016, that is 1 year later, 3 more payments are coming. 10 years later, 20 payments will come if at t equal to 0 there was no payment. But at t equal to 0 also there is a payment. So there will be a total of 21 coupon payments of the amount 375 that we had calculated earlier. Now we want the value at April 1, 2000. There are many ways to calculate this value. We can first calculate the value at t equal to 0. That is, simply enter n as 21, EMT as 375. Discount rate is given as 10%, or on a semi-annual period this will be 5%. FP as $5,000. Compute PV. So press 21 and press N, press 5 and press I by Y. PV is what we have to compute. Press 375 and press EMT. Press 5000 and press FP and compute PV. PV comes out to be 6,602 point. However, please note that this is not the dirty or not the clean price of the bond, or not even the dirty price of the bond, because we are today at April 1, 2015. We are not at January 1, 2015. This is the value at January 1, 2015. That means this amount has to be taken up to a value of April 1, 2015. Because when we put n as 21 and discounted it back, it gave me the value at t equal to 0, that is 6 months back. Or it would have discounted it to Jan 1, 2015. So we then have to take it another 4 months ahead or other 3 months ahead. So it would be another 5%. 5% is the semi-annual rate of interest. However, are we taking it up one semi-annual period? We're taking it up only half a semi-annual period, that is 3 by 6. This value finally will be the dirty price of the bond. Which comes out to be 6602.64. We'll store this in the memory register 1. We'll compute 1.05 to the power 1 by 2 multiplied by recall 1. It'll come out to be 6765.7. So this is the dirty price of the bond or the full price of the bond computed at April 1, 2015. That is 3 months after January 1, 2015 or 3 months before July 1, 2008. So the clean price would be the dirty price, that is this value, minus the accrued interest. The accrued interest we calculated in the previous slide comes out to be $250. So the quoted price or the clean price would be this minus 250. The price paid by the buyer would be 6765.7. You can calculate it like this, or you can say it as 250 plus 6567.7 minus 250 will also give you the same answer, that is clean price plus accrued interest, or simply the dirty price, that is the discounted back value of all cash flows. The next concept that we'll study about bonds is the concept of the spot rate curve. So a T period spot rate is the yield to maturity on a zero coupon bond that matures in T years. The spot rate curve is the graph of the relationship between the spot rates and the maturity. So this curve can be derived in many ways. So if you have the discount factors, then that is the spot rate, or it can be derived from a series of strips prices. So strips are zero coupon bonds that are created by stripping a regular coupon bond. So if a coupon bond paid us $505, we can essentially see this as a combination of 3 zero coupon bonds, one with a par value of $5, another with a par value of $5, and a third bond with a par value of $105. So it can be broken up into a series of zero coupon bonds. Instead of one bond, we can just look at it as having 3 bonds that are maturing to give us this value at the end of year 1, year 2 and year 3. So these strips are not issued by companies or governments per se, but investment bankers create these strips, that is they take the cash flows of this bond and then sell the principal part separately and the coupon part separately. Anyways, the point that we are trying to explain is that of the spot rate curve. The spot rate is the rate of interest applicable to a T-year cash flow. For example, in the initial valuation, we said that the 1-year rate was R1, the 2-year rate was R2, the 3-year rate was R3, so on and so forth. this R1 and R2 and R3 are nothing but the spot rates for the corresponding maturities. To derive the spot rate curve, we can take help of the prices of zero coupon bonds. So let's say a 2-year zero coupon bond or a strip is trading at a price of $970. So it will mature at the end of 2 years and the current price is $970. So what is the 2-year rate of interest? At t equal to 2, we are going to get a value of $1,000 since it's a zero coupon bond. So 2 years later, it will give you the par value at maturity and there is no coupon coming. At t equal to 0, the price of this bond is how much? 970. The price of this bond should be how much? It should be 1000 upon 1 plus R2 to the power 4, rather R2 by 2 to the power 4 if R2 is a semi-annually compounded rate. From this equation can we derive R2. Please note, if the compounding is semi-annual, then the discount factors would be 1 plus Ri by 2 to the power 1. The discount factors we studied earlier was for annual compounding, that is 1 upon 1 plus Ri to the power I. So similarly, if the price of a 3-year zero coupon bond is given, let's say a 3-year zero coupon bond is trading at a price of $900. Then can I compute R3 or the 3-year spot rate? Very easy, because $1,000 is what this bond is going to give me at t equal to 3. And the present value of this should be 1 plus R3 by 2 to the power 6. The present value is given to be 900 because it is trading in the market. So can I derive R3 from this calculation? Remember, the spot rate curve that depicts the relationship between the time to maturity and the spot rate can be derived from the prices of zero coupon bonds. That is, the yield to maturity of a 5-year zero coupon bond will be nothing but the 5-year spot rate. The yield to maturity of an 8-year zero coupon bond will be nothing but the 8-year spot rate, because there is only one discount factor, that is R8 to the power 8 into 2, or 1 plus R8 by 2 to the power 3. So R8 can be derived. So the 0.5 spot rate is the rate of discounting applicable for a 6-month cash flow. Cash flow is coming at the end of 6 months and this is the rate to be. The 1-year spot rate is applicable to the cash flow coming at t equal to 1, so on and so forth. This is what the spot rate curve depicts. Now, why are the rates different? Or what explains this shape of the spot curve, also known as the yield curve, also known as the zero coupon yield curve? They all mean the same thing. Why is it upward sloping or downward sloping or flat? We will study in the coming slides. However, we understand what the spot rate means. It is the yield of a zero coupon bond at that maturity, or it is the discount rate applicable to cash flows coming at that maturity. They may be different. Why should they be different? We will study in the coming slides. Remember, zero coupon bonds are called strips. They are created by request. When a coupon bond is presented to the treasury, the bond is stripped into two. That is the principal and the coupon respectively, and each of them is traded separately as a P strip, that is the principal only strip, or the C strip, which has one coupon only strip. For practical purposes and valuation, just remember strip means a zero coupon bond. Given the strip prices in the below table, compute the discount factors and the spot rates for maturities ranging from 6 months to 3 years and graph the spot rate curve. So the strip price is given. The discount factor can easily be calculated because if $100 is the par value, the expected cash flow is what? Expected cash flow is simply the par value. Par value multiplied by the discount factor is equal to the price of the bond. So there is only one cash flow and there will be only one discount factor applicable. Price is given, so discount factor will simply be price divided by 100. That's what the discount factor is. It will be just the price divided by 100. Question is to compute the corresponding spot rates and then plot them in a graph. So we'll do it for the 1.5 year maturity and the 2.5 year maturity. The remaining can be done similarly. Let's first calculate the R1.5, that is the spot rate for maturity at 1.5. So 96.05 would be equal to 100 upon 1 plus R1.5 divided by 2 to the power 3. Please note, the rate is an annualized rate. The compounding is semi-annual. That is, the rate applicable every period would be 1.5 by 2. This bond has no other cash flow. T equal to 1 is 0, T equal to 2 is 0, T equal to 3 is the first time a cash flow is coming, and that is the only cash flow of $100 because it is a strip. A strip means a zero coupon bond. So T equal to 0, nothing, 1, nothing. T equal to 1 means first 6 month period. T equal to 2 means 1 year or the second period. T equal to 1.5 would be the third period. If R is the annualized rate, then the periodic applicable interest rate would be R by 2. So 96.05 would be equal to 100 upon 1 plus R by 2 to the power 3, since the cash flow is coming 3 periods later or 3 6-month periods later. Then we compute the 3 month spot rate. 1 plus R 1.5 divided by 2 equal to 100 upon 96.05, or R 1.5 be 100 upon 96.05 to the power 1 by 3 minus 1 multiplied by . Please complete the calculation. I does not teach you the maths, but the concept of spot rates. Similarly, if you are asked to calculate the 2.5 year spot rate, that is, if cash flows are coming 2.5 years later, what should we discount them back? In the market, there is a cash flow that is coming 2.5 years later. How much is that cash flow? $100, because it is a zero coupon bond. That cash flow has a traded price in the market of $94.95. So can we compute the implied interest rate, or can we compute the implied yield? That yield will be the rate applicable to 2.5 year cash flows. So T equal to 2.5 now. Remember, these are all 6 month periods. T equal to 2.5 would be 5 6 month periods away. We are getting a cash flow of $100, which should be discounted back by whatever this rate is upon 2, since it's a semi-annual compounding, to the power 5, because it's coming 5 periods away, and this price is given to be 94.95. So we can again derive the 2.5-year rate. Please note all rates are annualized. So this will give us the spot rates for different maturities, and we can plot them in this graph with the spot rate on the y-axis and the maturities on the x-axis. This is referred to as the spot rate curve. Now please understand that the spot rate curve is normally an upward sloping curve. That is, longer term rates are higher than shorter term rates. So if you are lending $100 for just 1 year, you may be happy charging a 5% rate. Let's assume, because I'm lending only for 1 year, if 5% is an annualized rate, then I'll get 100 into 1 plus 0.05 at the end of 1 year. But if I'm giving my money for 2 years, then the rate that I will charge is the 2-year rate. Will that rate be higher than 5% or lower than 5%? See, I will get more interest because of the time. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the annualized rate itself. The annualized rate itself will be the spot rate for 2 years. Will that rate be higher or lower? Or will it be the same? Obviously, if I'm investing for 2 years, I'll get more interest. Even if the rate is 5%, I'm not doubting the compounding. I'm just asking, will the absolute rate itself change? May or may not. Generally, we have seen that people charge a slightly higher rate for lending higher. If 5.5% is the annualized rate he charges, then at the end of the second year, he'll get 100 into 1 plus 0.055 to the power 2. For a 3-year borrowing, that is what this yield curve represents, or the spot rate curve represents. That for a particular maturity of borrowing or lending, what is the rate applicable? The rate is always annualized. A normal yield curve implies that for longer term borrowing and lending, the rate applicable is higher. It's upward sloping. A flat yield curve implies that the rate for short term borrowing and lending is the same as for long term borrowing and lending. An inverted yield curve implies that short term rates are high, whereas the long term rates are lower. So long term borrowing and lending is happening at a lower rate, whereas the short term borrowing and lending is happening at a higher rate. Now there are various theories that try to explain the shapes of yield curves. That is, why is it not flat? More interest you will anyways get. Why does the rate also have to change for a longer term borrowing or a shorter term borrowing? These are the theories that will explain these shapes of the yield curve. The first theory that tries to explain the shape of the yield curve is referred to as the expectations theory. The expectations theory suggests that forward rates correspond to expected future rates. That is, forward rates are good predictors of expected future spot rates. So the spot rates today incorporate expectations of the future. Now let's first understand what is the meaning of the forward rate, and in fact this is where we begin with the derivatives on fixed income securities. Or for the first time, we'll now not deal with a spot rate. We try to understand what a forward rate is. Just like there was a forward on a stock. Forward on a stock said what? That two parties have agreed to exchange the asset for a price of $100 in the future. It is a right as well as an obligation. Similarly, A forward on an interest rate would be a contract between two counterparties. One has agreed to borrow and other has agreed to lend at a predetermined rate. That predetermined rate is called the forward rate, just like the predetermined price was called the forward price of the stock. So one party has to lend and the second party has to borrow at that pre-decided rate. So remember, the forward rate is decided today, whereas the borrowing or lending may happen at some point in the future, just like in the case of a commodity or a stock forward or future. So the expectation theory says that forward rates correspond to expected future spot rates. Now let's agree or let's understand that if the 1 year spot rate is equal to 5% and the 2 year spot rate is equal to 6%, compute the no arbitrage forward rate for a borrowing or lending to happen 1 year later for a period of 1 year. So if I'm borrowing 1 year later for a period of 1 year, what is the no arbitrage forward rate today? R1 is the 1 year spot rate and R2 is the 2 year spot rate. Spot rate means borrowing or lending today for a period of 1 year or a period of 2 years will attract these rates. The 1 year spot rate is given to be 5% and the 2 year spot rate is given to be 6%. Let's assume I borrowed $100 for a period of 2 years. If that is the case, then at the end of 2 years, I would have had to pay back 100 into 1.06 to the power 2. If I borrowed $100 for just 1 year, I would have had to pay 100 into 1 plus 0.05 to the power 1. First you have to see the rate applicable and then you have to see for how many years are you borrowing or lending. So if it's a 2 year borrowing, then the rate applicable is 6%, and if it's 2 years, then it has to be raised to power 2. So on and so forth, there was R. Now let's assume that I wanted to borrow for 2 years. A straight up option would be to simply go and borrow at the current 2 year rate. What I could have also done was just borrow for 1 year. 1 year later, I would have to repay this much money. I needed $100 for 2 years, but I still went ahead and borrowed for just 1 year. If that is the case, then 1 year later this amount has to be repaid back, or 1 year later I'll have to borrow again for a period of 1 more year, because originally I wanted the money for 2 years. So this entire amount, $105 or 100 into 1.05, I will borrow for 1 more year. The rate applicable for that borrowing I will fix today itself, because at t equal to 0 I can either borrow for 2 years straight or I can borrow for 1 year and enter into a forward agreement with somebody that 1 year later I will borrow for a period of 1 year at this pre-decided rate. Many ways of denoting it. F11 implies the 1 year rate 1 year from now. The FRM sometimes also use the convention 1 into 2. 1 into 2 would mean the 1 year rate, rather 2 minus 1 is 1. Hence it is the 1 year rate 1 year from now. If we denote F2 into 4, then this would mean 4 minus 2 is 2. That is the 2 year rate 2 years from now. F2 into 3 would mean 3 minus 2 is 1. That is the 1 year rate 2 years from now. So at the moment we are talking about F1 into 2, that is 2 minus 1, 1 year rate 1 year from now. So if I borrow for 1 year today, and today itself I enter into a forward agreement to borrow for a period of 1 year, 1 year from now. How much amount? This entire amount? Because I know this entire amount I'll need for one more year. 1 year later I have to borrow this amount for another 1 year. Let's assume that the agreed upon rate is F1 into 2. So then after 2 years, how much will I have to repay? This much I'll have to repay at the end of year 1, which I will borrow at the rate of 1 plus F1 into 2. So at the end of 2 years, I'll have to repay this entire amount. If I straight up borrowed for 2 years, I would have had to pay 100 into 1 plus 0.06 to the power 2. Now whether I do my borrowing in the first manner or I do my borrowing in the second manner, can the total amount that I eventually have to pay be drastically different? Can it be? It cannot be, because otherwise there will be an arbitrage opportunity. Let's say this number is coming out to be lower than this. Then I will simply borrow in this manner and lend in this manner and make a free profit. So these two numbers cannot be different at all. If they are, there is a riskless profit making opportunity. If borrowing straight was cheaper, then I will borrow straight and lend in this manner. If it was expensive, I will borrow in this manner and lend in this manner. So remember, the total amount that I am paying, whether I borrow directly for 2 years or I borrow for 1 year and then re-borrow for 1 more year, total amount has to be the same. Please note this F12 is the 1 year borrowing or lending rate that we have frozen today at t equal to 0. So at t equal to 0, we are entering an agreement that 1 year later I will borrow for 1 more year. The entire amount will borrow. So can we compute F12? This 100 doesn't matter, it will get cancelled. F1 into 2 would be 1.06 to the power 2 divided by 1.05, comes out to be approximately 7%. So what the expectations theory says is that the yield curve is upward sloping. That is, the 1 year rate is 5% and the 2 year rate is 6%. The yield curve is upward sloping because people have positive expectations of future short-term rates. The forward rate is how much? Forward rate corresponds to expected future spot rates. That is, people are expecting today's rate is how much? Today's 1 year rate is 5%, but people are expecting that 1 year later the 1 year rate will become 7% for whatever reason. Maybe economy is expected to go in a boom, or there will be a lot of demand for money, so rates will be higher. Because the market is expecting future rates to go up, that is why long-term rates are higher than the short-term rates. If the expectation of the future rate was also 5%, then the long-term rate will also been come out to be 5%. So the first theory is the expectations theory that says that long-term rates are expectations of or embody expectations of future short-term rates. All are spot rates. Spot rate means rate today. Today's rate can be for 1 year borrowing, can be for 10-year borrowing, can be for 20-year borrowing. All are spot rates. Short-term rates are for 1 year borrowings. Long-term rates are for 10-20-year borrowings. The expectations theory says that yield curve can be upward sloping or flat or downward sloping depending on people's expectations of future short-term rates. If future short-term rates are expected to go up, then the yield curve will be upward sloping today. If future short-term rates are expected to remain flat, then the yield curve will be flat. If future short-term rates are expected to go down, then the yield curve will be downward sloping. Let's assume that the 3-year rate today is given to be 10%. Let's assume the 5-year rate today, these are both spot rates, is given to be 8%. Please compute the 2-year rate 3 years from now. Please compute F3 into 5. So we'll employ the same logic. If we were to borrow today for 5 years, let's assume $100, then at the end of 5 years we would have to pay 100 into 1.08 to the power 5. However, instead of borrowing for 5 years straight up, we could have borrowed for 3 years and then borrowed again for another 2 years. We borrowed $100 for just 3 years. The rate applicable would be the 3-year rate that is given to be 10%, or we'd have to pay 1 plus 0.1 to the power 3 at the end of 3 years. And then we borrowed again because we needed a 5-year borrowing. We started with a 3-year borrowing, and then refinanced for another 2 years. This entire amount would have to be borrowed for another 2 years at the 2-year rate 3 years from now. That is F3 into 5 to the power 2, because it's a 2-year borrowing. Now again, 100 will get cancelled. F3 into 5 is the only variable, or F3 into 5, that is the 2-year rate 3 years from now, will be calculated as 1.08 to the power 5 upon 1.1 to the power 3 whole to the power 1 by 2 minus 1. This is the solution of this equation. It's an equation in one variable. You see, this rate will come out to be lower. It comes out to be 5% approximately, implying, or 5.6% approximately, implying that rates are expected to go down in the future. Future 2-year rate or a future short-term rate will be only about 5%, wherein current rates are about 10%. The current 3-year rate is about 10%. So the long-term rate in such a market is lower because future short-term rates are expected to go down. Future short-term rates were expected to go up. It would be an upward sloping. In normal economies, when GDP growth is happening, the shape is like this. Inverted yield curve or downward sloping yield curves are normally a signal of recessionary times. That is, people are expecting that in the long term or in the future, there will be no demand for money. No new businesses will set up. If businesses don't set up, people don't borrow, will interest rates go up or down? They will go down because nobody wants to borrow, nobody wants to do anything new. Because we are expecting bad times in the future, then we are expecting rates to go down in the future, and the yield curve will be downward sloping. Upward sloping, the opposite. We are expecting more demand for money in the future, or more businesses to start up, and hence rates will go. There is a first theory called the pure expectations theory, or the expectations theory as we studied. Simply says today's long-term rates or today's rates encapsulate expectations of future rates, and the forward rates that we derive are a good indicator of the future spot rates or the expected spot rates. The liquidity preference theory says that people prefer liquidity. That is, if you were to, or if I was to lend my money for 1 year, then I'm okay charging a slightly lower rate also, because in 1 year I'll get my money back. But if I'm lending for 10 years, then I know I'm getting compounded money for the next 10 years, but at least my liquidity is locked for 10 years, because if I need the money, I'm not going to get it back until 10 years. So in such a case, I charge a slightly higher amount, because people prefer liquidity. So if they have to lock in their liquidity for a longer period in time, they will charge a premium. The liquidity preference theory says that even if short-term rates are expected to remain flat, that is, short-term rates are not expected to change, even then the long-term rates today will be slightly higher, reflecting a premium for liquidity. Because it's not just about expectations, it's about expectations as well as a preference for liquidity. So it just says that, or liquidity theory says that whatever is your expectation is fine. On top of that, for long-term lending today, you will apply a slight liquidity premium. Doesn't necessarily say the yield curve has to be upward sloping. It can still be downward sloping, but not as downward sloping as it would have been in a pure expectation theory, because there will be a slight liquidity premium that will be added to each rate, especially in the long run. The longer the time to maturity, the longer would be the liquidity premium. Let's assume the 1 year spot rate is given to be 5%. Let's assume the 2 year spot rate is given to be 6%. And the expected 1 year rate 1 year from now is given to be 5.5%. Question asks, compute the implied liquidity premium. Now let's first calculate the 2 year spot rate as would have been from the expectations theory. Now let's assume the fair 2 year spot rate is R2. If I borrowed $100 for 2 years, I would have had to pay 100 into 1 plus R2 to the power 2 at the end of 2 years. Instead of this, if we borrow money for a period of 1 year, we would pay 100 into 1 plus R1, and then we would have to refinance it today 1 year later for a period of another 1 year, and that rate we would lock in today itself. It would be the 1 year rate 1 year from now, and this would be the no arbitrage relationship. The 1 year rate today is given to be 5%. and the expected 1 year rate 1 year from now, or the 1 year rate 1 year from now is given to be 0.5 or 5.5%. It will give us R2 as the square root of this minus 1. It will be the square root of 1.05 into 1.55 minus 1. If pure expectations theory was valid, then if current rate is 5% and the rate is expected to go up to 5.5%, then the 2-year rate today should have been approximately 5.25%. Whereas how much is the 2-year rate given? 6%. Because the 2-year rate will not just be the expectation. It will be the expectation plus a liquidity premium. So the liquidity premium can be calculated as 6 minus 5.5, that is equal to 0.75. That is, if this is what the expectations theory was saying, the yield curve, the actual yield curve is slightly higher, representing a liquidity premium. The third theory to explain the shape of the yield curve is referred to as the market segmentation theory. The market segmentation theory simply says that the rate of the yield curve can be upward sloping, downward sloping, flat. It can be a more complicated shape also. It can be a shape like this. That is, short-term rates are low, very long-term rates are again low, medium-term rates are high. Because it's all a function of demand and supply of money at a particular term. If in 3 years, a lot of people want to borrow, everybody wants to borrow for a period of 3 years for whatever reason, 3-year rates will be higher. Nobody wants to borrow in the short term, and short term rates will be lower. Everybody needs a lot of money in the short term, but they don't want to borrow for the long term, then long term rates will be lower, short term rates will be higher. So this interest rate at any point in time will be a function of demand and supply of funds at that term. So it says the shape can be any. There are 3 theories that try to explain the shape of the spot curve or the yield curve. First is the expectations theory. Second is the liquidity preference theory that says expectations are fine, but there is also a liquidity premium in long-term rates. And third is the segmentation theory, or also known as the preferred habitat theory. Some books also call it as the preferred habitat theory. That is, the demand of supply of funds at a particular term decide the rates at that term. Consider an annual paid bond with an 8% coupon rate and 4 years to maturity. This bond will make 4 payments. For a $500 bond, these payments will be $40 at the end of each year. That is an 8% coupon into a $500 par value, and $540 at maturity, that is the principal plus maturity. Suppose we are given the following spot rates. Compute the price of the bond. So please note, there are many ways to calculate the price of the bond. First is to estimate the cash flows. Cash flows are given to be 40, 40, 40 and 540, that is an 8% coupon. If the spot rates are given, then each cash flow will be discounted back at its corresponding spot rate. So discount like 1.06, really 1.07 and 1.08, and you will get the total price of the bond. If the spot rates were not given, rather the discount factors were given, then what would you do? Simply multiply each of these with the discount factors and sum it up to compute the value of the bond. Discount factors are nothing but this discount rate, 1 upon 1 plus I to the power I, or 1 upon 1 plus I by 2 to the power 2i, depending on annual or semi-annual compounding. If the yield to maturity was given, then also we could have calculated. We wouldn't discount it back by the individual rates, but simply discount it back by the yield to maturity. Yield to maturity is some blend of the spot rates essentially. It is the return that the bond will give provided all coupons are reinvested at the same rate, that is the yield to maturity. If the forward rates were given, sometimes that can also help. So 1 plus R4 to the power 4, for instance. And so it can also be written as 1 plus R2 to the power 2 into 1 plus F2 into 4 to the power 2. That is 4-year borrowing is the same as 2-year borrowing plus refinancing for another 2 years. Sometimes R4 may not be given. It may not be given directly, but these rates may be given, so you can derive 1 plus R4 to the power 4 from the forward rates itself. You studied 3 ways of calculating the price of a bond. First is by discounting with spot rates. Second, that you studied earlier in the first review on fixed income, that is simply discounting by the yield to maturity. And now you know that each of these calculations can also come from the forward rate and the spot rate. Depending on what is given in the question, you will apply one formula or the other. A 6-year treasury strip is priced at $850. Calculate the semi-annual pay yield to maturity and the annual pay yield to maturity. Question again is just elucidating the concept of semi-annual and annual compounding. If it's a strip, that means it's a zero coupon bond. It means $100 is going to come at the end of 6 years. If it's an annual pay, then the yield will simply be, or if it's an annually compounded, then the yield will simply be 1 plus y to the power 6. And that is given to be 850. If it is semi-annual compounding, then 100 upon 1 plus y to the power 12, rather y by 2 to the power 12 would be equal to 850. This y would be the annual compounding, this y would be the semi-annually compounded number. This is basically just a difference between the annually compounded yield and the semi-annually compounded yield. Please solve and verify your answers. You come out with 2.73% for the semi-annually compounded. Remember, semi-annually compounded yield is also referred to as bond equivalent yield, or the annual pay yield, which will come out to be 2.75%. Essentially explaining that a 2.75% annually compounded is the same as 2.73% semi-annually compounded. Please remember that the yield to maturity assumes that coupons will be reinvested at the yield to maturity and that the bond will be held till maturity. So in case an investor purchases an 8% 15-year treasury bond at par, how much reinvestment income must be generated over its life to provide the investor with a compound return of 8% on a semi-annual basis? Please understand that it's a 15-year bond which pays an 8% coupon, and he's purchased it at par. Let's assume the par value is $100. So the cash flows that the investor will receive would be 8% divided by 2 into 100, that is $4 at the end of every 6 months. The investor will receive $4 and at maturity, that is at equal to 15, he will receive $104. Each is discounted back again by 4%, that is 8 by 2, because yield is 8% semi-annually compounded. That's why the price is equal to the par value of $100. If price is equal to the par value, and this is the semi-annually compounded, yield, that is 8%. Question asked is that how will the investor earn a return of 8% on a semi-annually compounded basis? How much has the investor invested in this bond today? $100 because he has purchased the bond at par. If on $100 he has to earn an 8% semi-annually compounded return, means 4% every 6 months for the next 36 monthly periods. So you should receive 100 into 1 plus 0.04 to the power 30 at the end of 15 years. Or this is the money that he should have at the end of 30 years. You can compute 1.04 y to the power x 30, press the button, equal to, multiply it with 100. So you should have $324.33 at the end of 30 years. If he does, that means he's earned an 8% return on his $100 after 15 years or 30 semi-annual periods. This bond will straight up give him how much? We'll give him $100 principal back, and it will give him 30 payments of $4 each. That is $120 in the form of coupons. Or the total amount that the investor will get back from this bond will be $220, which definitely is not an 8% return. It is a much lower return. But please note that these coupons are coming before 15 years. Till the time t equal to 15 comes, these coupons can be reinvested and some income earned from that reinvestment. That reinvestment income better be 324.33 minus 220, or an amount equal to 104.33, if the investor has to earn an 8% return. These coupons, by the interest from reinvestment, should give him a total value equal to 104.33 for an 8% return. If he wants a 9% return, the reinvestment income should be even higher. Please note, if these coupons were actually all reinvested at 8%, then this reinvestment income would exactly have come out to be 104 point. You can verify that. So the first cash flow of $4 is coming when? Equal to 0.5 will be invested for another 29 periods minus 4. Is this the reinvestment income from the first coupon? 4 into 1 plus 0.04 to the power 28. $4 I already got the coupon. I can reinvest it for another 28 6-month periods. Let's say I do it at 4%. Minus 4 will give me the reinvestment income from the second coupon. If I sum up all these reinvestment incomes, the last 104 will have no reinvestment income. Then you can verify it will exactly come out to be 104.33. Or in other words, the yield to maturity is the actual yield or the actual return you get from the bond, assuming that all coupons are reinvested at the yield to maturity and that the bond will be held till maturity. Now the prices and yield for 3 annual pay bonds is given. So all these bonds pay annual coupons. Question asked is to plot the spot curve or the yield curve. That is basically compute the 1 year, 2-year and the 3-year spot rates given this information. So please note that this process is also referred to as bootstrapping to calculate the spot rates, because we studied that the easiest way to calculate the spot rates is to calculate the yield to maturity of zero coupon bonds or strips. The only problem is that zero coupon bonds may not be available for all maturities. So for 3-year, 4-year maturities, we may not have any zero coupon bonds available at all that are liquid or that are traded in the market. Hence, we may not get a good estimate of the 3-year or 4-year spot rate. Whereas bonds with coupons are more easily traded and are more liquid, and their prices are a better reflection of the current interest rates in the economy, because they are traded frequently and the repricing happens frequently. So a lot of times we take help of coupon bonds to calculate the spot rates and not just zero coupon bonds. So let's see how we can do it. The first bond has a maturity of 1 year. That is, at the end of 1 year, we will get a payment of 1050. The par value is 1000 and the coupon is 5%. We can compute the yield. Obviously, it will also come out to be 5% since the price is equal to 5%. The cash flow coming at t equal to 1 will be discounted back at 1 plus r1 to the power 1, and this comes out to be equal to 1000, giving us a value of r1 as equal to 5%, or the 1 year spot rate will be the same as the yield to maturity on this bond, that is 5%, because it is practically a zero coupon bond, because a 1 year payment of one time 1050 is coming, pretty similar to the cash flows of a zero coupon bond. That's how we derived R1, or the 1 year rate came out to be 5%. Similarly, for the 2-year bond, the coupon is given to be, means cash flow will be $60 at the end of t equal to 1, and they will be $1060 at the end of t equal to. To compute the price of this bond, I can directly discount by the yield, which will give me a price of $1000, as the yield is also equal to 6%. Our price is equal to R1. If I compute the value using spot rates, then the first cash flow will be discounted back by 1 plus R1 to the power 1, and the second cash flow will be discounted back by 1 plus R2 to the power 2. We know R1 from the first bond, that is 5%. We can impute, or we can substitute the value of R1 as 5% here and compute the value of R2. Similarly, we are given the price of a 3-year bond as $1000 and the coupon is 7%. So the cash flows will be at t equal to 1, $70, equal to 2, $70, at t equal to 3, $1070. The first cash flow will be discounted back by 70 upon 1 plus R1. Second will be discounted back by 70 upon 1 plus R2 to the power 2, and the third will be discounted back by 70 or 1070 upon 1 plus R3 to the power 3, and this price we know is given to be $1000. We can even discount it back by the yield of 7% and verify that the price will come out to be $1000. Now we know R1, that is 5%. We know R2, that we calculated from the 2-year bond. If we imputed in this, will we be able to calculate the value of R3? because that will be the only variable left. Similarly, from a 4-year bond, we're going to compute R4, R5, so on and so forth. This is the process of bootstrapping, that is computing the yield curve or the spot curve from coupon bonds rather than strips or zero coupon bonds. Please verify the 2-year spot rate comes out to be approximately 6%. And the 3-year spot rate will come out to be about 7.1%. Now, many a times in the curriculum, you'll hear the spot rates being talked about as the LIBOR rates. So please note, the rate that we studied, the risk-free rate that we studied, a lot of times the LIBOR is the proxy for all these rates. It's not important to know how LIBOR is calculated, but it helps to just get a small background. LIBOR stands for London Interbank Offered Rate. This is the rate that big banks in Europe are offering for accepting US dollar denominated deposits. That is, it is a US dollar rate. They are accepting the deposits also in dollars, and they will pay the interest also in dollars. So this rate is a US dollar rate that banks are offering for accepting 1-day deposit, 30-day deposit, 2-year deposit, 1-year deposit, 45-day deposit, 20-year deposit. I can accept a deposit for any maturity, and for that maturity I may charge a slightly different rate. That is nothing but the spot rate today. That is for a particular rate, will always be annualized, but depending on the maturity, as we just studied in the discussion on spot rates, this rate can be different. The spot rate is often calculated from the LIBOR rates, that is the rates that banks are offering, big banks in Europe are offering to accept deposits for a particular maturity. For the exam, please note that if the 2-year LIBOR is given, use it as the 2-year spot. If the 30-day LIBOR is given, use it as the 30-day spot. Please remember, the convention in the LIBOR market is actual by 360. And the interest is calculated as a simple interest. For example, if the 45-day LIBOR is given to be 5%, then if you invested $5 million in a bank for 45 days, the interest that you will get will be calculated as the principal into rate into time, that is 5 into 0.05 into 45, that is the actual number of days that you kept your deposit, divided by 360. So the year is assumed to be 360, and in the numerator there is an actual number of days. What you can know, further compounding happen. With a 45-day rate, then after 45 days you will get 5 into 0.05 into 45 by 360 as your interest, or your total amount that you will get will simply be 5 into 1 plus the 45-day LIBOR into 45 divided by 360. We'll understand it better when we do some questions involving the LIBOR rates and the rates of interest. That was just about some revision and some introduction or further introduction to fixed income securities. And we'll study more about forward rate agreements, swaps, and fixed income derivatives in sessions to come.